I tell my attorney clients, you going broke, you financially struggling is not helping anybody else. It's not. You can only help so many people. And you being in a position of strength, then you're actually in a position to really help somebody.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live recording of the Financially Legal podcast. I'm your host, Emery Wager, co-founder of Confido Legal. We are an embedded payments platform specifically designed for the legal space. And on Financially Legal, we deal with all issues at the intersection of finance and the business of law. I come from legal technology in the legal sector from the client perspective. And so I'm very passionate about improving the client experience and improving what it's like to be a client of law firms. And one of the things that I struggled with most working with law firms and continue to struggle with is the unpredictability of the hourly billing model. We've done some episodes recently on flat fees, and Brita Long is one of the foremost experts in flat fee legal services and helping law firms transition to flat fee legal services. And I pitched her on coming on Financially Legal and doing an episode on kind of how do you implement it? What's the pricing? All these mechanics. And she said, "Hey, Emery, stop. The first thing you need to do is get your mindset right." And we had a great conversation that went way longer than either of us expected on the different aspects of mindset, relationship with money, your relationship with seeing yourself as successful. And so today we're going to focus exclusively on the flat fee mindset and all of the components of that. I'm super excited. Brita Long has been an attorney for 20 plus years. She much of that, by the way, was under the hourly billing model, correct?
Well, it's almost 30. And yeah, I mean, the first, about 8 years? Well, I was a prosecuting attorney for a couple of years, but yeah, when I started my own practice, it was all hourly.
So she's seen hourly, saw the light, and transitioned to flat fee, and now helps firms, coaches law firms on that transition. She is a former Northwesterner, so but long enough that I can claim her as one of us. So now lives in Texas, has 3 adult sons, one of whom I understand practices in your firm. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. I'd love to dive into that on an aside or a tangent. She's also written 3 books, one of which, the Happier Attorney, is focused on this kind of flat fee transition, and a lot on mindset, actually, of flat fees. And she's also taken a lot of time off to think kind of deeply about this transition and mindset and whatnot. So with that, I'm super excited for this episode. Brita, I'd love to start with you kind of shocked me with the history of hourly billing, and I know we some of our listeners may know this already, but give us the kind of the short, surprisingly short history of hourly billing, and like what did things look like before that?
So I was surprised by this myself. I started practicing in 1997. I had been in law firms even prior to law school. And, everybody just billed by the hour. I didn't even think about anything differently. And, the big firms did it, which was the first law firm I worked in, was a big firm in Phoenix. And so, if the big firms do it, obviously it's the right thing to do, right? Because they know more than we do, right?
Obviously.
And it wasn't until I started teaching flat fees that I really got into the history of it. And it's bad. It's really bad. So we have been, attorneys have been around since ancient Rome, ancient Greece. They didn't call them attorneys. We have been, it turns out, there's been disputes between people ever since there were people. Okay. So we have been attorneying forever. And we've gotten paid for our services forever. Guess how we were always paid? Flat fees. Year after year, decade after decade, century after century, for thousands of years, until the 1960s. And this is what really is going to hopefully tick people off. Guess whose idea it was to start billing by the hour?
I was shocked when you told me.
The insurance industry. The insurance industry, who, it arguably may not have our best interests at heart or our clients. They wanted to make sure, I still don't think that it makes sense, but the theory behind it from them was that they wanted to make sure that the attorneys were actually working. If you say you work an hour, I want you to work that whole hour. And they were trying to measure efficiency. Again, I think they missed the mark by a mile, but that was what the thinking was. And so they got the big firms to get on board. Then they get the ABA on board. And here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened very quickly.
Yeah, I was so surprised that, it's only been 50 years really of
Right.
that being the predominant billing model. And
Right.
it's, from the client perspective, it's totally crazy that you would embark to solve some problem that you have no idea what it's going to cost, or a very loose idea of what it's going to cost, and your attorney, your expert, also doesn't really know what it's going to cost. And so the two of you are embarking on this journey, and you may end up spending way more than the problem is actually costing you in the first place. You really just, in many cases don't know.
Right. And with no control. And what was interesting is the problems started right away, but it got entrenched so quickly that here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Backtracking. So the idea that flat fees are new, that they're untested, some people have a very visceral reaction to flat fees, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would even suggest that. That's new. That's scary. Like, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back to what worked.
Yep.
For centuries. I hope, if nothing else, that gives some people some peace that, oh, okay, this isn't some newfangled, woo-woo stuff from Seattle. This is just going back to the traditional billing method.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was very surprised, and, to the point where I had to go out and do my own research, and you're totally right. It was, the ABA did kind of, they got on board, like you said, very quickly, and, provided some guidance, and that became, the model. So super interesting. So we're talking about kind of getting back to the traditional model, and let's transition into mindset. In your book, you talk a lot about the relationship with money, people's relationship, attorneys' relationship with money. Talk a little bit about some of the, I'll call it maybe more dysfunctional relationships with money, and then maybe you could talk about what is a good relationship with money, and how does that kind of relate to transitioning to flat fees?
Well, I used to think when I was an attorney, especially when I was struggling, I used to think that, it was just me. Something was wrong with me. Every other, maybe a few exceptions, but, every other attorney out there was doing better than I was, had their act together. It was easy for them. You don't know what you don't know. And it turns out, it wasn't just me. I was actually doing better than I thought. And but I had a kind of a love-hate relationship with money. I had a very confused relationship with it. On the one hand, a big part of why I went to law school was so that I'd been a single mom since I was a very young teenager. Part of the reason I went to law school was to provide financial stability, like real financial stability for myself and my son. And, we go to law school, we're told, I don't know about anybody else, but I was told, the average starting is, this amount. And it was a dollar amount that, at the time I couldn't even fathom. Like I remember I graduated in 1997, and I think they said the average is 60,000 starting. I could not even comprehend what I would do with money like that. Couldn't even fathom it. And of course, you get out, and that's not the average starting. Like, I don't know where they pulled that number out, but that was not me, and that was not my friends at all. But so we have this. We need money. We need it to eat. We need it to keep the lights on and the heat, and to feed our families. And we've worked really hard to get here. We should be rewarded for that. It took us a lot of money to get here. I mean, we forget, remember what it even took to get into law school. It's expensive, much less these kids that are graduating now, $300,000-$400,000 in debt that they can never get rid of, except just to pay it off or die. So we have that on the one hand. We have that everybody thinks we make a lot of money, which we don't, of course. And then we have this other kind of cultural thing in the legal profession that we're not supposed to make money, that we are supposed to give our services away a lot, that if somebody asks for a refund, we're supposed to give them a refund, that our fee has to be reasonable, even though no one can define what that means. So we have this kind of competing thing going on. Was just trying to do what I needed to do, pay the bills, do well, and I was always kind of behind. And when I started changing how I thought about things, when I started seeing clients who, I think I'm a decent person. I'm a compassionate person. I have a lot of empathy, and I've been in really tough financial positions in my life. And so when I would have a client come in, I was empathetic to them. And then I was practicing family law, and then I would go in and I would give it my all. It felt like I would go into the lion's den, do battle with the lion, and bring out their child. And then they wouldn't pay me. And I would, okay, well, they don't have the money, da, da, da. And then I was in Olympia, so a smaller town. And then you'd see them with a brand new pickup truck. This is pre-social media. And you're like, oh, okay. Or you'd see them out at dinner. Oh, okay. They had the money. It was a priority thing. They just didn't pay me. That stinks. And it was also not fair to my clients in that, again, they don't know what it's going to cost. And I'll never forget, I had one client with hourly, without getting into the facts. I really think he was in such a horrible position, and it really wasn't by his own making. He had a wife who had severe mental health issues. Severe. He was really doing the best he could, keeping his family afloat, his kids, and he had paid me, but we'd gotten a balance pretty high. And I said something, and he's like, I just paid you like $2,000. And I'm like, yeah, and the balance is, and it felt like I was just the last person in a line that was pushing him under the water.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I got my own kids to feed. At the time, Sally Mae wasn't, I couldn't like, hey, I'm not going to pay you this month because my client didn't pay me. That doesn't work well. So when I started seeing that maybe people do have the money, or at least being honest with them about what it was going to cost so they could make choices. And then also seeing how targeting different clients, what is really a big chunk to somebody making $40,000 a year is not to somebody making $200,000. And I would see some of the attorneys in town who had high-end clientele, and they weren't better attorneys than I was. And in fact, in many cases, I'm like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? They just had better clients. They just had clients that had money. They weren't marketing to broke people. And so I started kind of targeting, going after people that could pay my fees, and recognizing that money wasn't a bad thing. And it actually helped me become a better attorney in that I wasn't financially stressed. Mark Chin, who's a great attorney out of Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, he wrote Dumping the Billable Hour. He has a quote, and I have it in The Happier Attorney. The greatest threat to the legal profession is a broke attorney. Wholeheartedly agree to that. With that. But I had to get over my own kind of money is bad. And I see that with attorneys all of the time. They kind of have this, like, if I charge, then I'm harming my client.
Yep. I remember when we were prepping for this, you were talking about kind of this zero-sum mindset where, if I'm taking $1,000 from my client, then that's $1,000 that they don't have. And getting over that kind of zero-sum mindset is a huge, or not getting over it can be a huge, huge barrier.
Yeah. So many attorneys have this very scarcity mindset. And I get it, especially when you've had financial issues. I grew up, I thought, pretty poor. We weren't as poor as I thought, and then I was a very young single mom struggling. There were times I didn't make enough waiting tables to pay the babysitter. So I get like but when I started to see how wealthier people handled money and how that scarcity thinking had actually harmed me, one of the things that I noticed, this was back in Olympia, I had offices throughout town, and they were always decent other than my first one. But, they were fine. And then I moved into a brand new, beautiful Class A on the water. And my entire practice changed. It was like a light switch. I was the same attorney, same service. The perception in other people changed. I got much better clients immediately. I jumped up to the A list of attorneys immediately, just from the location. And I started to see how wealthier people, what their relationship with money was. That they considered investing, not just spending. I had a family law client who had a business, pretty good business, and he was embroiled in this horrible divorce. And his wife was making demands that were not reasonable. Let's just put it that way. And I'm getting in there like, that's, BS. And, there's a range of reasonable. She was over here. And, I wasn't going to put up with that. We weren't going to. And he very wisely said, here's the deal, Brita. What you need to understand is this is wrecking my life. I can't function with this. I can't think with this. I can't work on my business with this. When this goes away, whatever I have paid her, I will make back in a month. Oh, okay. I mean, it was a totally different way to think. And so it was over time, I started to change. But yeah, if you think that money is bad or that you're going to be a bad, horrible, greedy person, if you accept money, you're going to have a hard time with flat fees because you're going to underprice. And that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a self-esteem issue too. There's a lot of attorneys that have, quite frankly, that have a self-esteem issue. They don't feel worthy. And it's this weird cycle where I hear, well, I can't charge that because, it was really easy for me. It's easy because you've been doing it 20 years. It wasn't easy 20 years ago. You should be getting paid more because you know what you're doing. But we are so brainwashed into that the only value we have is our time. So if it doesn't take us a long time, we have no right to get paid for it. We shouldn't get paid for it. We're greedy. We're horrible if we get paid for it.
Yeah. And a lot easier to say, my hourly rate is a couple $100 an hour, as opposed to saying this is going to cost you $25,000.
Right.
I guarantee you there's someone who's going to listen to this and say, Brita, you were helping these clients who originally, in kind of state one, you were helping these clients that couldn't afford those services, or setting aside the truck guy, some of those folks couldn't afford those services. Then you started kind of like pushing into a different type of client base. What about those original clients? Who's serving those if you are moving, to a different set of clients? And I think I know what you're going to say, but I know there's also somebody here who is wondering that. So maybe you could address that.
Here's the beauty when you get, I'll back up a little bit. First of all, there are plenty of attorneys who are always going to serve those clients. Okay. I tell my attorney clients, you going broke, you financially struggling is not helping anybody else. It's not. You can only help so many people. And you being in a position of strength, then you're actually in a position to really help somebody. So you can still improve your own financial situation. You can still go and do low bono. I'm a big low bono, not pro bono fan. Mm-hmm. But my duty, this might rub some people the wrong way, but my first my first duty is to me and my people. And I cannot give what I don't have. And this idea that, we just owe everybody, I don't buy that. I don't subscribe to that. I have, and when you are helping someone who is appreciative, who does what they're supposed to do, who does what tell them to do, that is such an amazing feeling. It is such an amazing feeling versus feeling like you have an obligation to just give to whoever, quote, needs it, and they don't appreciate it, and they don't do what you tell them to do. And that builds resentment, whether we want to admit it or not, at least in me and the other attorneys I know. It does. Yeah. It builds resentment.
I think it's a great point. I mean, we, when we were just getting started, I'm, making a comparison, we took, any client, we worked really hard to, convince some very small law firms that they should come on our platform. And then when they came on board, we realized that they weren't actually serious about their practice. They were doing it half time or quarter time or even less, whenever kind of work came their way, and they had a real, a day job. And that, that shift in mindset of, we really want to help people who want to build their practice, who want to grow, and they end up finding a lot more value in our services. I definitely see kind of an analogy to what you're saying.
Yeah, and this might rub some people the wrong way, but I also really believe that pain is here to teach us whatever that pain in life is. And so sometimes when we have, and I've been guilty of it, I've been guilty of thinking I had a cape behind me and I'm going to go in and save people. I'm the hero. It feels good. Be careful with that. Because when you go in and you think that it's your job to save people from themselves, and you feel good because you're the hero, you don't know that if you are helping them or you're actually interfering with what they're supposed to be learning. And sometime, all the time, at least in my life, every single time, when I have found myself in a, oh my God situation, what happened here? I needed to learn something. And so, it's just like if you have kids who are learning how to walk, that can be a pain in the butt. It's a lot easier to just pick them up and carry them, right? Why do you not do that? Because they need to learn. And so I'm a big believer in, sometimes it's best to let people struggle a little bit, but it's not my job and my responsibility to save another adult from the consequences, the inevitable consequences of their own actions.
Yep.
If I choose to give, and I do, that's an entirely different matter. But we have this, like, you have a duty to give back. We're told that over and over. And I think that it's helpful to be maybe a little bit more discriminating as to who. Not everybody is entitled to my service.
Yeah. We have a client of ours, a solo attorney, Jacqueline Harani, who has developed kind of a sliding fee scale where clients actually apply for lower, rates. And so she can, to your point, like, make a very clear decision. I'm going to, I am going to serve this person, and we both know what we're getting out of this, of this relationship. So super. And I've never kind of seen
love that
approach before, but really, really interesting. So let's shift gears to a different mindset issue. The talk to the person who's saying that won't work in my practice area. I know you've heard that before. Complex litigation, contested family law. What would you say to that person?
So gently and with respect, I hear that from people who are very entrenched. And what I think what is going on is that it's scary. They don't know how to do it. And so instead of setting their ego aside and saying, I don't know how to do this, it's easier to say, it can't be done. It can't be done. It can't be done. And then that leaves them off of the hook. To the point where I've heard this in my attorney fee group, Attorneys and Flat Fees, the Facebook group. When people are in that group that know who else is in the group, who know that there are plenty of attorneys, thousands of attorneys, who have used flat fees in complex litigation, who've used flat fees in family law, arguably one of the most volatile and unpredictable practice areas, including myself. And so it's like we're on the moon and somebody's saying, you can't go to the moon. And we're like, we're freaking here. What are you talking about? So of course it can be done. I've done it. I've used flat fees exclusively for over 15 years, including in family law, including in complex family law. And in fact, the more complex the matter, the easier it is to use flat fees. What I would say to that person is it's one thing if somebody comes at it with that can't be done, I'm not going to argue with them about it. You're right. And they are absolutely 100% right that flat fees will not work for them because they're not open to it. And if you're not open to it and you tried to use flat fees, you're going to self-sabotage in a million different ways. And it's not going to work.
Could you could we go back to your point about how flat fees are sometimes easier in complex? Say more about that, because that was kind of unexpected.
So one of the biggest problems that attorneys have with flat fees is that they overcomplicate things and they overthink things. The fact that I make a living and a good living teaching flat fees is mind-boggling to me because it's so simple. But we attorneys overcomplicate it, and that's why I have the job I have.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we buy everything every single day. Every single day. So let's say, I'm going to flip it back. I'm not going to answer your question, Emery. You are. Like,
bring it on.
So let's say you had a renovation. You were renovating a house, restoring a house even, okay? Let's say you have a big old Victorian on Queen Anne, okay? And you hire somebody to come in. And this is a big deal. And if anyone's ever renovated a home, sometimes you don't know what's behind the drywall. You don't know what's behind the plaster, okay? So the person comes in and they say, this is a 3-4 year job. This is a big deal, okay? I can't give you a set final price for this, okay? How do you think that they would bill you? and say, this is their only job. They're just going to come in and work for you 5 days a week, 40 hours, whatever. They're not tracking their time. They're just going to keep going every single month. They're just going to keep going. You can stop at any time. How is the simplest way to pay them?
I mean, probably just a fixed fee for, either milestones or a fixed, call it weekly or monthly fee.
You just answered your question. That's how you do it. The more complex the case, the matter, let's say the one that comes to my mind is the Exxon Valdez. That could still be going for all I know. Okay. It was huge. Everybody was involved. Went on for years and years and years. And, it wasn't like, it was a big deal that was kind of unprecedented. So no, I wouldn't advise somebody how I normally would advise them. Like, oh, it'll, tell them how much it's going to be for, the discovery phase, or, this discovery phase went on for, I don't know, decade, two, I don't know. So yeah, if I was advising somebody and they said, how am I going to bill for the Exxon Valdez? Monthly, yearly.
Mm-hmm.
This price per year. And obviously you're explaining it. Like, I hope nobody takes this and just is like, oh, Brita said this is how I'm going to do it because of what I heard on a podcast. It's more complex than that. But you're going to say, this is how much I'm going to do nothing but your case for however long, and it's going to be this per year. There are going to be months where, I don't do anything on it. There are going to be months where that's all I do. And in fact, before I went to law school, the big firm that I worked for in Phoenix, it's exactly what they did. Well, they didn't even do it. Their client did it. Their client was an auto manufacturer. And they got tired of tired of hourly fees. And they said, this is what we're going to pay you every year.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we have one case, whether we have 20. It's that simple.
I think actually that this is a good segue into the other kind of mindset piece. There's someone out there probably saying, hey, I work at a big firm. This is all well and good, but how does a big firm that's doing exclusively hourly to date, or maybe 1% flat fees just so they can say that they do it, how does that person make an impact?
Well, they have to have they obviously have to have control. They have to be able to do it. Okay. And what I would say to a big firm is, you're going to be breaking up the big firm into smaller chunks, into the different practice areas. Okay. And again, the people have to be on board, because otherwise you're going to self-sabotage. So I would think of it like the prosecuting attorney's office. Like a big prosecuting attorney's office. Okay. The fee is going to be like the offer, a plea offer. So in a prosecuting attorney's office, there's going to be guidelines. Okay. It's not like every attorney has complete autonomy to offer whatever they want to offer. Okay. There's guidelines. And if something is, if there's facts that, are outside of that, then you go to, your supervisor and was like, okay, we normally would offer this. I think, we should offer lower, whatever. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there's guidelines. And so, but within though, you have autonomy. So in a larger firm, I would have your sections, your practice areas, and come up with here's our base. Here's our standard, here's our ranges. Here's where it's going to go up. Here's where it's going to go down. and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, the math has to math. You have to set a fee high enough that it works, which is a whole nother,
Mm-hmm.
we could talk about that for hours. But that's how I would approach it in the big firm.
Mm-hmm.
Break it up into little bites, every little sections.
Mm-hmm. So it can be done. The going back to the it can't be done mindset. That if you're working at a bigger firm, know that it can be done. And so,
well, how did we do it? Go back to what we started with. How have attorneys done it for thousands of years? I mean, not to be flippant, not to be a jerk, but seriously, when people say it can't be done, then how did we do it?
Yep.
Of course it can be done. We've done it for thousands of years.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm now remembering the story that you told about, you were in a workshop and you were trying to get this attorney to say they were going to charge a flat fee, that they were saying that's way too high. No one would pay for it. And you were just trying to get them to physically say the words, this is going to be $10,000 or whatever it was. And they couldn't even get the words out of their mouth. So yeah, it's always tough. It's always tough. Like the mindset.
When we talk about the mindset, going back to that story, this person not only couldn't get the words out of her mouth. Okay. When I first suggest, and it was clear this was an exercise. Okay. I wasn't suggesting she charge that price. This was an exercise. We're playing law office here. Not only was she highly resistant, she used the word unethical. Not only would no client pay for that, that was unethical to charge that. Okay. Thinking, look, I think there have been 2 times in my life, I've heard the word unethical in my direction. She meant to just shut it down as a protection for her mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd shut up. I'm not going to shut up.
Yeah.
She got the words out eventually. And it wasn't 10,000, it was lower than that, but it doesn't matter. And within 3 months, she was charging that number.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the goal. I didn't even suggest that she charge that. It was an exercise to see if she could say it. And within 3 months, what had been unethical to even discuss, she was charging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all in our heads.
Yeah. No, it's a great story. Actually, one of my favorite financially legal episodes we did a couple years ago is interviewed a bunch of different attorneys about their how they talk to their clients about money, and it was really funny. Getting ready for that initial consult and just practicing saying what the what it would be, so that when the time came to say what the fee was going to be, they would actually say the right thing and not all of a sudden say half.
Well, you have to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe it, because unless you are a sociopath, which I'm assuming you're not.
No.
If you don't believe that your service is actually valuable, if you believe you're really just selling a form like they could get for free on the internet, you can't do it. There's such an out of alignment that you can't do it. Mm-hmm. Again, unless you're a sociopath. So it's important for you to understand, which is again, we could spend all day on this.
Yep.
What you are bringing to the table, how your client is better off as a result of hiring you. Because if you think that you are really just doing no better than the free forms on the internet, you're toast, and you're not going to be able to charge,
Yep. Well, I think we could, there's so much on this topic, but we're kind of getting up against our timeline here. So, Brita, what if, one of our listeners is like seeing the light right now and wants to make this shift, feels like they can do it. What would you recommend like as a starting point, and talk maybe a little bit about kind of what you do and some of the resources that you provide?
So the first place to go is thehappierattorney.com. And that tells you about my work. It also, I have a recommended reading tab. And so you can get my book, The Happier Attorney. I also have links to Mark Chin's book, Dumping the Billable Hour, which is not available on Amazon. You have to get it through his website, or mine, okay? And Value Pricing by Ron Baker, who is an accountant. It doesn't matter. So that's the first thing. You can look at YouTube, The Happier Attorney, for videos. It's starting to open up. And that's step one, is to know that it's possible and start seeing what speaks to you. And to pay attention to what's going on in your own practice, why you're interested in the first place. What is the pain point? Whether it's, I hate tracking my time, whether it's, I'm working 50, 60 hours a week, which, by the way, you don't need to. You don't need to. This idea that you're not a good attorney if you're not working 50, 60 hours, don't get me started on that. Or you're struggling financially, or whatever the case may be, pay attention, because we kind of it's not that big of a deal. It is that big of a deal. And when you're ready to okay, I'm ready for the next step, then get in touch again through Happier Attorney, book a call with me, and we'll do a strategy session where we'll find out exactly what's going on and what flat fees can actually do for you. The numbers are startling.
Mm-hmm.
The math is absolutely startling. It feels too good to be true sometimes, but it's true.
Yeah, I mean, we just we recorded an episode on kind of a financially legal episode on how AI is impacting kind of billing models and everything, and how that's impacting profitability. Of course, flat fees played a big role in that discussion, and that's dropping next week as well. So I think, this is the future. It's coming fast. Brita, really appreciate it. I want to read a Facebook post that I found because you were tagged in it. You got credit, but I thought it would be a good way to end. This is a attorney who said, "To everyone who ignores the wise humans telling us to bill flat rates, stop. Not to bill flat rates, or not to bill flat rates, stop. This has been the least stressful week in my law firm ownership as a result of starting to push flat rate services about a month ago." So it's this was an unprompted post. So this really is true. This is reality. And given where technology is going, this is definitely, I would have said the future, but also apparently this is history as well. So thank you very much for joining us today, Brita. Everyone, we drop these episodes every couple of weeks, so you can get the most up-to-date info on Financially Legal by following Confido Legal on LinkedIn. We'll let you know when new episodes are dropping, and you get to participate in these live, unedited recordings as well. If you prefer email, you can go to confidolegal.com/financiallylegal. So thank you all for joining, and have a great day.